So I'm going to go ahead and start, okay?
Please do.
Okay. Good afternoon on this Sunday, on a monsoonal Delhi afternoon where I am and where Waswo is in Udaipur and Olivia is also in Delhi, and the art historian and curator Sony Casone is in Pune, and the Gallery Espace team is dispersed across Delhi as we all are. Thank you to our audience for joining us on this afternoon and spending time for the next hour listening to two foreigners who have engaged very profoundly and deeply with miniature painting, and two art historians. I'm an art historian, but I'm not going to do much of the talking. I'm just going to play a little bit of the traffic police person to guide things. And more importantly, we will conclude today by having the art historian and curator Soni Casone talk about some of the research that she's doing with border painter Shankar Kumawat, who works with Waswo x Waswo. So I wanted to just share before we started the format of today's presentation. We are going to have the two artists first speak. We'll start with Olivia Fraser, and we've kind of broadly identified three themes that we want to address. So at each moment, each artist will speak for 10 minutes addressing the particular theme, and then we'll move on to the questions. So the three themes are focused in this manner. So the first one is, these are two artists who practice art in India, but they're from elsewhere. Both are placed into a lineage of painting. Olivia has a kinship lineage, which she will discuss, while Waswo has entered the lineage of Indian contemporary art, and through his love for Indian painting, through his love of working in India, and also his engagement with Indian modernism and Indian art history, and also with young contemporary artists here, especially printmakers, for example, and other people who are practicing miniature painting. Both of them have workspaces here, and both of them have used the language, the format of miniature painting, which I must underline here is a relatively new invention. There is no such word as miniature painting, let's say prior to the late 18th century. There's no notion of a miniature it was all manuscript painting, and it was murakas. So when we think about the word miniature, we're beginning to think about things like paintings that were made in the bazaar, paintings that were made for people who are visiting India to carry away to Britain and to wherever else. Niccolo Manucci, an Italian traveler, also had miniatures painted, for example, of yoga postures and plants and animals, these kinds of things. So a miniature, the minute we use the word miniature, we're already entering a very complex place between, let's say, colonial tradespeople, science practitioners from Europe and India, and Indian practitioners engaging with European clientele. So I like the word miniature painting if it's very specifically used for this kind of work. The second theme that we're going to focus on is the way both of them look at abstraction and narrative. Olivia's work has progressively become more and more abstract, profoundly graphic, and very carefully manipulated materials, very carefully positioned elements on the surface of the paper. There's a lot of visual game playing of a joyous kind, not of a manipulative kind, but if we think about the word, let's say, the spirit of Leela or play. Waswo also has deeply entered into another aspect of the language of manuscript painting, but now in the miniature painting format. But he also moves somewhere between the idea of telling a story, which makes it into 3, 4, 5 images. And this idea of narrative is very important. So we have abstraction and we have narrative, and we'd like both of these artists to talk a little bit about how that works, how each of you make miniature painting through other practices, how each of you came to it through other practices. And we can also discuss, we're also going to discuss what working in different media, different visual languages, and also at different scales means to each of you. Finally, the third issue that we're going to talk about is, and this is really relevant now because all of us are working at home. And if we have collaborators, we have children, we have family, we have to catch an airplane tomorrow to go to another place. All these things are really important to think about today because, and so the third theme is space and ways of working. Olivia works in her bedroom primarily, and Waswo has this amazing setup that he calls the karkhana, and it really is a karkhana. It's like a there's a studio in the countryside in Varda, which is about I'd say about like 45 minutes outside of Udaipur, in a village, and it's a joy to reach there. And it has a kind of it has a rural quality, but also because it's on the side of a road, you see lots of people passing by. And this is where he set up his studio with his hand-painted backdrops. And we'd like to discuss here, what does it mean to work alone most of the time? So Waswo does work alone a lot, and then he's also working with his members of his karkhana. Olivia primarily works alone, but she also has some people who come and help her, but she's also in a very interesting self-made Gurukul family of other painters. They spend time together and they paint together, and we'd like to hear about that. And how does this experience of being by yourself, working with other people, color your painting, literally, the experience of painting? And how does how does the space of work and the mundanity of practice produce moments of transcendence? I do really want us to conclude with that conversation, because there's something in Waswo's karkhana where the minutia of Shankar's painting, when it moves, let's say, from the borders into the center, or the amount of investment that Rakesh and Waswo put into experimenting with perspectives, sizes, narratives, positions. If you put the palm tree here, how does it work? If you move that palm tree, or if you color it this way, there's a kind of attentiveness to craftsmanship that is so profound, and it might become like transcend the individual maker to include the whole group, maybe. And in Olivia's case, in her work, you have a lot of attention, a great deal of attention paid to the absolute perfection of the lotus petal, and the arrangement of in a painting such as Breath, where the extension of breath is the closed lotus as it slowly opens and then fully opens, and then it begins to close, and then it's completely closed. So this notion of time, of performance, that it moves through a series, the idea of seriality, all these things produce a very particular kind of experience, which both holds the craftsmanship, but also goes beyond it. So these are the three themes we're going to look at, coming from lineages or making lineages of miniature painting practice, abstraction and narration, and what does it mean to work in a studio or in a karkhana, and how does the craftsmanship that happens in the studio or the karkhana create an experience of both immediacy, you're so close to the painting as you're working at it, but also this kind of transcendence, because you have to then move back and then elevate it to a thing that you experience visually and away from your hand, so to speak. And then Sony Casone, we will come to her, and I'm really excited because it's always wonderful to see art historians, especially people are just beginning to make a path for themselves, a name for themselves, explore their ideas. And she's been working with Waswo for some time, and she's worked with Anil Relia also won a book. So it's not that she's a complete novice to the field, but it's really nice to see somebody who's really taking practice very seriously and the practitioner very seriously and is familiar. And you will tell about that too, because you're from a family. You're familiar with the very refined words for a shade of silver or a particular kind of color, or the way that a border might be drawn. So I'm really excited about the merging of a lineage of practice, art historical work, and your own analysis. So shall we begin, Olivia, with you?
Yeah.
10 minutes, perfect.
Yeah. So I'll run through my kind of artistic journey. And I suppose it all begins with my great aunt here, Eileen Agar. She was one of the great surrealist painters of last century. And she was one of the few women surrealists who exhibited in London, the 1936 International Surrealist Exhibition. I'll turn this off. There we go. We lived very close to us in London and used to come over every weekend for Sunday lunch, and we'd go to visit her studio. And in her studio was like an Aladdin's cave of extraordinary paintings and sculptures and extraordinary works that she created. And this is one of them, which just completely inspired me during my childhood. And she had vibrant, as you can see, sense of color. She was born and brought up in Argentina, and spent a lot of her time coming backwards and forwards a bit by boat, doing long sea journeys. And a lot of her imagery uses nature, particularly from the sea and birds. I don't know whether that's also been something that's filtered into my own way of looking at the world, but and also has strong sense of pattern and very, very strong sense of design. I came to India in 1989, and I had some forebears or kinsmen from 100 years prior to my Aunt Eileen. They were called the Fraser brothers. James Bailey Fraser was a painter in the early 19th century. He painted this painting, this view of Calcutta. His brother was an East India Company official who worked based out of Delhi. And the two of them together commissioned Indian art, what's become known as commissioned Indian painters to paint paintings for them, what's become known as company school painting, where there was a wonderful fusion between East and West, and with a kind of the scientific eye, possibly, of James Bailey Fraser, asking the Indian artists to put their extraordinary vision and their sensitivity to their subject together to create imagery that was frequently against a white background. Anyway, I came with a book that had just been published about these brothers, and in it had all these series of watercolors done by James. And I started off thinking, well, I'll start off where he left off. He painted all Calcutta. He had it in his diary. He wrote that he was going to paint Delhi. So I started off in Delhi, painting that cityscape views, painting the monuments of Delhi. I had a great, exciting kind of discovery of watercolor. I'd never used watercolor before I came here, and I found it very thrilling to use this new medium that seemed to have a sort of diaphanous quality to it. And I suppose that reflects back at my great aunt, who used these diaphanous layers to layer her painting with, but also it was about my own appreciation and understanding of what I was seeing here. This is Safdarjung's tomb in Delhi. I did a whole lot of them like that. This is again, this is the commissioned work, the East India Company commissioned work done by the Frasers. It's called the Fraser album, of a group of people that they came into contact with. And here you can see the stark white backgrounds, the individual portraits, the extraordinary depth and detail, but also there's a very sensitive, I feel, Indian methodology to the painting. if you had a micro, if you could see up very close, you'd see sort of individual hairs portrayed on the creases and all. So I was very influenced by that, and this was an example of what I started off doing, using watercolor, painting from life, painting people, painting Indians I came across with. It was very much an outsider's vision. Here I got very excited by miniature painting in the National Museum here, and wanted to do my own version. And I started with, this is one of the earlier ones, I guess, where I'm looking at miniature painting. I'm slightly stylizing things. I'm flattening backgrounds. But I'm actually also using some of the ideas from miniature painting. So, for example, the man on the left, Srilal Joshi, is the actual painter of the fard, the image that's in the middle ground with these singer who sings this devotional song to a rural Rajasthani god. And then I've had so these are all people I know in the foreground, and it's basically a continuation of using portraiture and getting excited by the vibrant colors. So I was using watercolor still, but layering it, trying to reach for the intensity of miniature painting. Here is my first miniature painting, or one of my first miniature paintings, where I'm actually using the colors, the actual pigments. The green is malachite green. I just got so excited when I learned all of this through a studio. This particular image is from is using imagery from Natadvara, which is a place of worship in Rajasthan, where Krishna is worshipped in his 8th incarnation as Srinathji, very close to where Waswo lives and paints. And I got very excited. I was learning within this studio with all these people who were painting devotional imagery. And this one's on a tiny scale. It's not in the large scale that Srinathji imagery or other Natadvara imagery is usually. It's normally temple backdrops that are wall-sized. But here I was doing something using these tiny brushes and very thrilled by the whole idea of the repetitiveness and trying to learn the vocabulary of miniature painting, basically. And here again, I'm using the vocabulary. I did a sort of triptych in a way of the sacred trees of proving one, Krishna 1, 2, and 3. This is about the mango tree, which is also associated with Krishna, and of course the cows, which are associated with Krishna as well. And I did a triptych with this is the normal, as it were, coloring, and then here gold sacred coloring, and then here is the blue, the colors of Krishna when he's shown in painted in paintings. And here I was deconstructing, so I start sort of abstractifying the vocabulary I learnt. I started to sort of abstract them, abstractifying and deconstructing Krishna's, Srinathji's face. And here, using the colors, the different types of blue, the very, very dark indigo, the of Srinathji of the young incarnation, and then the lighter one called dusk. And here I use this is called darshan. I've done many paintings of eyes. I'm very fascinated by this whole idea of exchange of vision. Again, in Hindu and in the whole business of going to a temple and you exchange a vision with the god. And I rather love that works and rhymes so well with art. When you go and see art, exactly, you're doing the same thing. The spectator brings, the onlooker brings their own response as well. So I've done many series of eyes. Then I've used hands and feet as well. These are my feet, and this is called pilgrimage, using sort of, again, a sacred vocabulary, repeating it, making it in a way my own. I've done many pilgrimages myself, on foot, around, up into the Himalayas. And here I was using the sort of the idea of the sacrality of the imagery, the colors, the shape, using archetypal shapes, the shapes of triangles and squares, and thinking about what they mean. And there's all sorts of little And then again, here's the hands. In fact, that's behind me currently as I speak. But again, that's the same thing of using my hand, but bringing in an idea of that this got the lotus on it, and that is an imagery that you do see of lotus within the hand, which has so many different meanings. But this one I'm calling awakening. And it's got the 7 chakras, the main 7 chakras in it. And here I'm starting to get interested in the whole idea of yoga and yogic philosophy, and the lotus being the central key part of that. There's this idea of the macrocosm within the microcosm, and the lotus provides a roadmap throughout the body where you focus in during meditation and you focus on the lotus. And here I then start, like Annapurna was talking about, abstracting even more, pulling apart the lotus, making it into sort of just the petal itself, seeing how it moves and shifts, being interested in the idea of stillness and movement within meditation. And again, this one's called Kundalini, this idea of this sort of serpent-like sort of movement and yet also stasis simultaneously there. This is 1,000-petal lotus again. This is using the same idea. And this is about breath, the idea of the breath opening and shutting, and sort of in a way bringing the lotus back to its full form again, which perhaps, you know, I'm interested in thinking about, you know, speed or slowness. There's a whole slowness of actual painting that goes into painting all these tiny, you know, this imagery, which at this stage in all these paintings is all about 3 foot by 3 foot. So it's not on a miniature scale like Waswo is doing. It's using miniature techniques, but it's on a larger scale. And this is very large. Each individual part of this is about 3 foot by 3 foot. And again, gold leaf, I use an awful lot of that. And here we're coming to the end, and I'm going over time. But then I started using bees in my work a lot because I wanted something active and something passive, you know, the bee and the flower. And plus, during meditation, I'm just fascinated by all the whole visualization within meditation that I myself practiced here, that I've read in books of yogic philosophy, and that can be so, that is so, connects so well with trying to be an artist, and because it's just there. And so this is about Brahmari. This is about trying to create this sense of union within, with this sense of sound. Again, here with bees, creating this ever denser pattern. Which are they bees? Are they flowers? Are they lotuses? Is it all just one? And in a way, that's what I've been trying to move towards. And then finally, this is what I've been doing in lockdown. I've been seem to be moving outwards. I've been moving in, and now I'm moving out back to the what's surrounding me, nature that's surrounding me. Mangoes. We can have mangoes, thankfully, even if we're in lockdown. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I'm going to request Waswo to start his presentation.
Yeah, how do I shift over my video? Will that happen automatically? Is my video there? Yes? Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, good. That's what I wanted to know. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Annapurna. Very good presentation, Olivia. I have a guest here I'm going to bring in right away. This is our
Hi.
VJ.
Hello.
Is with me. And as many of you know, our VJ is the one who actually paints the miniatures that I conceptualize. So I'm coming from a very different space than Olivia. And what happened is I looked at the miniatures that I saw in the bazaar in Udaipur, and I saw them as a means of self-expression and a means of telling a narrative. And Rakesh was so nice to start working with me in doing that, but it's a very back and forth kind of collaboration. So I'll share my screen and start going through this, and Rakesh can come back in later. just want to go to the full view. Can you see this?
Yes, yes, we're able to see.
Is it there? Okay, good. So my presentation is called Modernizing Miniature Practice. So what happened is when I came to India, and this is one of the very first miniatures that we made, one of the early ones from, I think, 2007. This is called I'm Serenaded on the Lake, and it depicts me in a boat being serenaded by somebody with an electric guitar. He's kind of a Hydra-esque figure. This is actually a sort of a parody of a Ravi Varma painting of Saraswati. And I injected myself into it because I very much wanted to start telling my own narrative of some of the things I experienced in India and in Udaipur specifically and in Rajasthan through the vehicle of miniature painting. And because Udaipur is kind of a very fun, crazy place, this seemed like one of the good places to start. So anyway, we started to explore Indian modernism. So here we have a Mitra Gill, very famous, of course, the brahmacharis. This is called the other brahmacharis. And we've kind of extended the frame out to the right. And on the right-hand side, you can see myself with my trusty Rolleiflex camera and my partner, Thomas, drinking from a water bottle, who's leaning against me. And I like to think of us like we don't really belong there. We're kind of intruders. We've kind of just popped into this scene, you know, that you can imagine Amrita might be painting. And, you know, we're very much the clueless tourist, because when these miniatures, the early miniatures, were being painted, that's pretty much the way I felt and what I was trying to express. As we went along, we started to play with other forms of modernism, and it was like Rakesh just really grew as a painter, because I would conceive things he was not at all used to painting, because Rakesh was a bazaar painter who was painting birds on note cards and, you know, the Lake Palace and things like that. So suddenly we were working together to make a painting like this, which actually takes figures from Rabindranath Tagore and Mukul Dey, and I'm sitting there in the circle listening to the teacher, who is Rabindranath. This is another one that hasn't been seen too much. It's minus its border here. This is actually a nod to Shilpa Gupta. And you can see me and my partner Tommy again in a gallery setting. And you have some of Shilpa's work there, like There Is No Explosive in this. And of course, the police tape that says there is no border here. But the title of the miniature is There Is a Border Here. That is the title of it. Because I was beginning to understand that it would be quite difficult for me to sort of break into the Indian art scene, I felt at the time. And I felt that not just because I was a foreigner, but also because of using this medium, because contemporary art is so focused on video and installation, et cetera, rather than a craft such as this. So this is a picture of Rakesh. Normally we do these, I come up with a very quick stickman-like sketch. I explain it to Rakesh, he makes a preliminary drawing. We go back and forth with a preliminary drawing, and then he begins to paint. And once he paints, there's still a little back and forth that goes on during the painting process. This miniature was very important to Rakesh. This is actually a homage to Ram Gopal Vijay Varghese, who was one of the grand uncles of Rakesh, excuse me. And we actually took images from Ram Gopal Vijay Varghese's notebook and inserted them in here. And actually the center landscape is also from a Ram Gopal Vijay Varghese notebook. And you can see in the upper left, there's me and Thomas running away from the charging bulls, like we're being chased away from the village. So that was highly narrative, the last one. And if you can look at this again, but many of our narratives are very simple and they can be contained within a very small frame. So this is called I Am Watched While I Eat. And it was referencing some of my early experiences in Udaipur and Rajasthan, where I would be invited to people's homes to dinner, and they always insisted that I ate first. They would not eat with me. and which was very uncomfortable for me because I didn't know how to politely eat with my fingers, which later I was taught. But anyway, it portrays that discomfort in some way. And then this one here, this is called the Deluge, and it references a very famous Miwari miniature painting that hangs in the collection of the City Palace here in Udaipur. It's the Sasarma River, but you can see how much Rakesh has grown as a painter. From somebody who is painting birds on note cards, he's suddenly doing things like this, where, you know, and he's adding his own elements, like the monkey bounced on the rope and the man pulling so hard on the rope on the tree. Those were Rakesh additions. So it started to truly become a collaboration. We also started to explore some very creative things. This was a piece that appeared at the India Art Fair in, I think, 2014. It was called Dream of the Meers, and it was a reference to the Rajasthani kavad, which is carried from village to village by a holy man for spiritual reasons. And we had this made, and we had, I forget how many paintings are in here. There's quite a few paintings in here that tell a narrative, but you can't see it in this image. And now this is one of our more recent works. And this was actually at the show in October at Gallery Espace, which was called Like a Leaf in Autumn. And of course, there's the Icarus reference, and there's the Jatayu reference, the wing falling down from where Raman has cut the wing off Jatayu in his attempt to rescue Sita. This miniature is called It Doesn't Always Work the Way You Think. We like to include humor, but you know, it's always kind of a humor that has a little darkness and a little deeper meaning. But an important thing to notice in this miniature is like the upper part is now all gold leaf, and the lower part is actually work that was done by our border artist Shankar, who's been a part of the team since almost day one. We've been working together for, I think, 14 years now, since 2006. Here you can see more of Shankar's border painting. And I just want to like make the point, I inserted this one because not all of the miniatures are narrative. Some of them are, I would say, almost surreal. I'm very much into dreams, so sometimes we like to do dreamscapes. So this is one of those. It's an Untitled from our Blue series. Dreams are important to me. In fact, we did a whole series called Dream in Bundi. And here you can see how Rakesh has just grown so incredibly. This is an untitled piece from our Blue series. Rakesh's brushwork, I mean, the landscape is just so incredibly gorgeous. It's amazing to see how he's grown. But then also you can see that Shankar's border work is now invaded the center. So Shankar's border work has become part of this ball that I'm holding up, or that the sadhu is holding up on his finger and that I'm photographing with my Rolleiflex. So the longer we work together, the more I start thinking, like, how can I use various people's talents in different ways and combine them and do new things? This is another one that is largely, or that's all our VJ Rakesh and also Shankar's work. It's called The Moon of Dreams. And this is Shankar Kumawat, the border artist, and his son Chirag. Now this is actually on the roof of my photo studio that I keep out in Varda. And as you can see, we work in a very rural area. We work in Udaipur and on the outskirts. And it's a very different scenario than when you're living in Delhi or Mumbai. We're rather isolated from the larger art community. We're more connected with maybe the local art community a bit, but you know, that adds a complexity to our work also.
Waswo, can you just talk a little bit slower? Some people are.
I'm worried about going over time, so that's why.
Finding it a little hard to understand.
Okay, I'll slow down a little bit. This was a major work we did in, I think it was exhibited at the art fair in 2017, if I remember right. It was called Chaos in the Palace. It's a suite of 18 miniatures. This caused a major shift in our work because prior to this, it was pretty much Rakesh working with me and Shankar doing the borders. But when we did this piece, we brought in another collaborator whose name is Dalpat Singh Jingar, because I realized that Rakesh could never get this done in the amount of time we had. It still took us about 7 months to complete this entire suite of paintings. It's narrative in a sense, but the narrative doesn't run in one direction. You can go from left to right or right to left or up to down. And depending how the viewer's eye goes through it, that will change the narrative or how you might interpret the narrative. So in the back of this photo, this you can tell was taken during COVID times. In the back, you can see Dalpat Singh Jingar on the rear right, and he became our assistant and he painted all of those palace backgrounds. And then his brother Bunty is in the front, and they work together in this space, and they've become good friends and they've become part of the team over the past, I think, 3-4 years. So basically what I asked Dalpat to do was I gave him a general form for the palace. And I said, I need this painted 18 times, but I want you to paint it 18 times identically. But each time I want you to use different colors. I want no 2 of them to be the same. So Dalpat did this part of the work, and then Rakesh came in and did the interiors. So here you have the Subodh Gupta black and yellow taxi from Mumbai or Delhi. And then you have some collectors. One man is holding a tablet. Of course, there's a monkey and etc. But this is how we created that entire suite of paintings. And right now, this is a very, very new one that we have just completed. Actually, it has gone for framing and will be sent to Gallery Espace soon. It is a rework of an older miniature, actually. The older miniature was called Evening Tea. And this one we call Another Evening Tea. But the power dynamics have changed in this. In the first Evening Tea that we did back in 2006, it showed me sitting on a terrace similar to this and an Indian man cleaning the floor and another Indian man bringing some food to me, which was the sort of experience I would have when I would be at a guest house as I was a tourist. But now we have the Indian man joining me in a suit and tie and Tommy serving us tea from a tray. And then you can see the enormous amount of work that Shankar has done in this very thick, large gray border around this painting. So just to conclude a little bit, you know, we work together. So basically the Karkhana team now is myself as the, you want to say, conceptualizer, our Vijay as the main painter, Shankar Kumawat as the border artist, and Dalpat Singh Jingar as an assistant in the Karkhana. Dalpat is sitting here in the black shirt. I'm in the back, of course. Shankar's to the right, and his son Chirag. And then you can see Jay Prakash and Ganpat also, who are my assistants, and one of my landlords, Ram Singh. So we get together, we socialize. It's not all work. We try to make everything we do very close and sort of a bonding experience. And this is the last photo I'll show. This is all of us down in Baroda at Christmas time wearing red hats. So that's my presentation. I might have run through this too quickly, I don't know, but I was really afraid of going over time.
So we are gonna say thank you to Waswo for sharing his beautiful Karkhana practice. And before we take any questions, they've both of them have touched on this question of narrative, of being outsiders, working in the medium of miniature painting, the space of work, but we can develop these themes further in any questions we take. I'd like to now invite Sonika, Soni to talk about the hashiye, and then we will move on to questions from the audience.
So, I want to present here a collaboration which enabled a simple pattern to bloom into an indigenous style. And I know this is like a very ambitious project. It's a very ambitious topic to cover in 10 minutes, but I'm going to try, and I'm going to quickly shuffle through some slides. And it's good that Waswo presented right before me, because then we know the context. We have been seeing Waswo's paintings from last 10 minutes. And you must have noticed the mysterious borders around these paintings. So these hashiye or borders are done by Shankar Kumawat. He lives in Udaipur and is one of the major collaborators and friends of Waswo. So these compositions, without limiting their content, these minuscule, so here's this slide wherein I've taken only the border patterns from different paintings. And if here we see these minuscule patterns, they are usually rendered in two tones, the darker base and white line or very light line work or drawings on them. And here I'm going to do is this painting which we just saw. It's called The Village Life. It's a huge painting. Let's try and dissect the border from it. So here is this one small chunk of border I've taken here and desaturated it to see what was going in the detail. And here we see the main motifs in the borders are usually exotic animals, birds, shown in harmony, most of the time shown in pairs. There are additionally guldaste or floral arrangements also, which are usually derived out of Mughal and Deccan paintings. And these main motifs are then surrounded by vegetation, by either dense trees or elliptical, ovate or cordate tiny leaves tapering at the top, and a very thin vein in the center, running in the center to give it more volume, or say to make it denser. And the remaining space, the empty space, it has fillers. And these fillers are usually dashes or diagonal lines in the even direction. Waswo and Shankar, they actually did many experiments using this simple pattern. For instance, here, they added these Chinese clouds, and then there are these raining clouds, and then there are, and depending upon the concurrent mood of the main subject of the painting, there are lotus ponds and lakes and so many things. Here we can see that the things took interesting turn when Waswo slyly started inserting these metaphoric patterns to interact with the main subject. This is an untitled composition from the series called A Day in the Countryside. And this one is called Rebirth in Absence. Here I'm not going to go into the subject matter or detail in the subject matter because of the time constraint, but what I want to show is that how the use of a simple or a set pattern opened endless possibilities for combining different spaces and states of mind, and in process it actually helped in defining this pattern as well. And initially they use this pattern to depict water and heavenly bodies, as we can see in these two beautiful compositions. From here, there is one beautiful composition. It's called Beyond the Border. And here we see how the pattern took the entire painting space. This triptych, where collaborators literally came out of the border world to explore amazing possibilities. The signature border pattern or the scheme of the pattern blooms and spread across the triptych. There are color pops in between done by R. Vijay, the painter who usually done the main subjects. These color pops provide this composition with a certain 3D effect, as we can see. And here, if you can see this ivory suited main nayak or the protagonist of the painting, which is by default Waswo himself, here he is observing this black and white metaphorical nature with the help of a telescope. And here we can see these Bundi style angels approaching him, showering red hearts on him. And this monochromatic pattern here is utilized more as an idiom or fused to construct a style which has a character or a voice of its own. And now I want to show some of the recent works from two series. The first one is called Planets, Moons and Untitled Orbs. In this series, we see tinted planets from some from unmentioned dimensions along with their moons in varied placements. Everything in these heavenly bodies is meticulously filled with what I call the Shankar pattern or the Shankar scheme. And all these planets, they have this imagined or metaphoric space populated with the dreamy jungles in various arrangements devoid of any human interaction. Some of these are in rings, as we can see here, or concentric circles, as we can see here. The tints of these planets now, interestingly, they also resonate the type of the jungles in them. For instance, this green orb is either a rainforest or a freshwater swamp forest. And here we can see these elephants frolicking under the waterfall in the midst of lush looming trees under this waterfall, and there is torrential rainfall all over. On the other hand, on the contrary, there is an orange orb. And as the color or the title would suggest, it basically shows a dry land. And there is an extended desert and the caravan of camels. Interestingly, I want to go back to this slide. See the moons here. All the moons have the same pattern. But artist Shankar, he achieved these craters by, say, controlling the pressure of the brush and by tonal variation. And all of these appeared as if captured with a telephoto lens. And there's this other series. This is Untitled, but it has these dreamy trees where Shankar pattern is used against the iridescent background. And these trees appear as if suspended in the dark conceptual space where the onlookers, say, can rest their imagination or their perspectives. I want to come back to the video. And there's, in the end, I have this one picture. This is Shankar, and this is RVJ. We just got a glimpse of him in Waswo's presentation. So to conclude, the simple three-step pattern, when correctly identified, visualized, and nurtured with Waswo's imagination, it grabbed the entire painting area to create its own timeless space and emerged as a soothing indigenous style. So that's all for this presentation, for this session from me. Over to you, Annapurna. Thank you.
So I would like to invite, in the remaining time that we have, which is about 10 minutes, we have to conclude this at 5 p.m. I want to invite conversation, any questions from the audience. So here's a question that Niyati Shinde has sent from Bombay. This is for Olivia. Olivia, what are the sizes of the works you showed at the start?
So the ones I started off when I was doing watercolor, that varied from what I could carry with me outside and inside, and watercolor paper. It started off very small, but then I'd come back and I'd do it on a larger scale. So I did a bit of both. With my ones which had people, that was always small, always. I always loved miniature scale. I discovered actually, since living out here and since enjoying miniatures, that actually I have also another great aunt who was a miniature artist in the UK, who I didn't realize until after she died that she was that. But the more recent work, the last lot has all been much bigger. This is an example of multiples of work where I put lots of smaller pieces together to create a larger whole. But in general, my main size, I suppose, is about 3 foot by 3 foot, and that's the largest size paper so far I've managed to, handmade paper I managed to get.
I'd like to ask a question both to Waswo and to Olivia, so I'll ask Waswo to go first. How do you think about scale in painting in the Karkhana?
Oh, scale within the painting itself or scale of the painting? I like small images generally. Like even in my photography, I always used to like small images that you can hold in your hand. I like them sort of book size, I would say. So I still go with that idea of that the miniature is something that you would slip in like a folio. But within the painting itself, it's been a little bit of a debate between Rakesh and I, because he really thinks more like a traditional miniaturist. Right. So for him, scale isn't that important, because in miniature paintings, you tended to develop like perspective more through layering, the way I understand it. Whereas I come from a very Western perspective, you know, and oftentimes I'll go, oh my God, you've made the water bottle as big as an elephant, you know, or whatever. It doesn't look right. And I can't accept it. And it's like, no, this has to be this big. It can't be that big. And we have these little debates. That's part of the process. But I'm afraid, because I don't want to get too overly critical, because then I can kind of ruin the feeling of it being a miniature, and it starts looking more like an illustration in a children's book or something too, and I don't want that. So it's something, a line I have to walk.
But both of you also play with scale in terms of the multiples, and when they're displayed together, for example, the hands behind Olivia and the covered that Waswo did, the idea of seriality or multiple images changes the scale of the work intensely.
Yeah.
So I'd really like both of you to comment on that.
I often have used also, I've thought about, I love using the very small brush that has one single hair at the end. I love using that, and I love the idea that it gets, that you can look at something in such minute detail, but also stand and see something from far away as well. I like having those two actions as myself as an artist, also as myself as do you call it, a spectator, or someone who's looking at an artwork. One of the reasons why I love the Srinathji backdrops, you know, the temple backdrops, because they have exactly that in them. They have this extraordinary vision that allows you to go up close to look at every single brushstroke, but also to stand back and see it. And I've also I've used often, because I use patterns and I love the whole idea of repetition, and when deciding on what size that pattern has been, often I've just used 1 rupee as my starting size.
Oh, how wonderful.
just as a something to sort of, you know, think about.
Anchor it.
Not that I necessarily do, but it is a little bit of an anchor.
Yeah. And Waswo?
Well, we've been doing some full Wasley works, which didn't really come too naturally to me at first, but we've gone in that direction. People do like large things that can hold the wall, of course, in the gallery system. I'll say that very judiciously, I guess, or carefully. But I still prefer little small miniatures. I mean, those are what I really like. So there's been some compromise in being able to do things like that Chaos in the Palace, or we recently did something, Dreams in the Orientalist Arboretum. Mm-hmm. So little suites of small miniatures that fit together and are meant to be a set, you know, so that way you get a smaller, more intimate painting, mm-hmm. which we both prefer. But yet you can also create something that sort of has the wall power that people are looking for at, say, an art fair. You know,
so the border is like a really interesting device that allows you to expand and contract scale.
Yeah, it is. Shankar does a wonderful job. Sometimes we're using gold borders now too, so we sort of alternate. There was the phase we went through the red borders. The border contains it all, so I find the border very important. It doesn't seem like a miniature if it doesn't have the border.
We have 2 anonymous attendees asking the question, which is, I think, a very nice question. This one's for Waswo. Is Waswo planning to use other miniature schools in his works, for example, Deccani schools?
I think we've been pretty much all over the board already. I mean, I don't think we are trapped in one miniature school.
Oh,
I mean, we've got Rakesh was trained here in Udaipur, so he has a more of a Miwari background and a Miwari approach to things. But I mean, already we've gone totally off the charts with what we do. Like I showed at the beginning, where we're doing Rabindranath Tagore paintings, you know, in miniature style. So anything is possible for the future.
So there's another question for Olivia. What particular painting styles or painting languages besides the one of miniature painting has influenced you, or what do you like?
So I suppose, I mean, apart from the 2 initial ones I was talking about, my full bears and all that, I've always been fascinated by people who travel. And so whether it's because that's what I've done, I've traveled here to India, I guess, and so it's whether it's people who've traveled in their imagination, like Rousseau. I'm fascinated by his amazing jungle paintings. He'd never been anywhere. You know, he was a postman in whatever, in Paris. Or Gauguin. I loved his extraordinary paintings. And then of course just miniature painting. You know, when I went to the National Museum and saw the back in the early 90s, and saw I just had no idea, and saw these extraordinary jewel-like paintings of a tiny size with these polished surfaces. And yes, I love doing the whole kind of process. I absolutely adore the process of miniature painting, where you have to build up layers of paint and use this agate stone for grinding, for burnishing, and for polishing the surface of what you're painting. And you can still, even if it's on a large scale, you can still hold up my work and Waswo's up to the light, and it'll still have that sheen. It's still sort of something in a way very tactile, despite being so kind of very flat as well. It's not like the art that I used to do before I came here, which was very kind of before I came to India, which was very thick, pasty oils that almost you could cook with. It's different kind of thing.
I have a add-up question for Olivia. I wanted to know, Olivia, that we see a lot of Srinathji and a lot of Pichwai tradition elements in your paintings. Is there any deity besides Srinathji that has influenced or moved you enough to be included in your artwork or in your practice?
I mean, the strange thing is I didn't know I fell in love with Srinathji imagery before I knew anything about Srinathji. I mean, that was the interesting thing. I just was immediately attracted to it. I felt there's a sort of confidence. There's a I don't know. There's the geometry of it. There's kind of a different form of sacred geometry, which is so different again from from the West where I've come from. Again, that's also to do with size, like Waswo was talking about. You know, the different sizes is also to do with and how you position things on a page, or even position when you're painting his face, how that all works out geometric wise.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's been my main sort of inspiration, and after that, I don't know. I'm guys, I'm on. And so after that, I my family coming in to join in. That's been my main inspiration, really.
I'd like to read a question that Susan Bean has sent in, I think all the way from Vermont or Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's a wonderful question. How do each of you think about collaboration? Waswo works actively with other artists. Olivia works directly with materials, techniques, and approaches of miniature painting. How do these collaborations complexify the idea of the genius individual artist that has been so powerful? Let's ask Waswo to start.
Well, I love working in collaboration with Rakesh and Shankar and Dalpat. I would obviously say that because I don't have a high degree of skill level when it comes to painting. I was trained as a photographer, but also I think there's just something wonderful about sharing these experiences and going, like in Udaipur every day, I'm on the back of Ganpat's bike and, we're going to see Rakesh, and then we go see the Dalpat, we're checking up how things are going. We go down to Shankar's porch and sit with his son Chirag and have a beedi and a chai. All of that's a wonderful experience, and then we often get together as a group too. So I think there's sort of a bonding that comes through collaboration, but I always compare our process of work to a rock band, because there's definitely a leader, because I feel there needs to be. And so I become the composer, I guess you would say, the composer of the music, and then the rest of them are sort of musicians who help me make that music, if that makes any sense,
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I do work in my bedroom studio. I do have some artists who come occasionally and help me grind pigments, prepare everything, help me set up, help me with my work. And I'm still very much in contact with the guy who actually was my initial, at the back of another studio where I learnt, and he was in a way my initial teacher. And I talk with these people and another teacher I have another guru I have in Jaipur, and I talk and exchange ideas. Or I bounce my ideas. I've learned so much through. I'm not shut off from the world. I'm not shut off from my inspiration, which is something that's absolutely rooted here. I'm living and breathing it, discussing ideas, discussing the whole idea of visualizations within yoga with my yoga teacher, with my yoga practitioner, and also with my these guys who come every so often. I have chats about kind of Indian philosophy, what they feel about it, that's what inspires me. So I'm, the door is wide open for interaction.
So it sounds like for both of you, the idea of the genius singular artist is not so interesting.
No,
I agree with Waswo. I think I want to be open to the world, open to interaction, open to dialogue, and to people saying this is just not correct. I love it when people say that.
If you see,
I just say something. I mean, I had to fight for galleries to even recognize our VJ. They said, "Oh no, just market it under Waswo X Waswo because it's too long if you say Waswo X Waswo with our VJ." So I had that battle to go through, and then as we added Dalpat and Shankar, it's like, well, how do we credit all these people? But that's why we're working on a book now called Karkana, which is going to be exploring all that facet of it, everybody who's involved and how we work.
So here, Annapurna, if you go historically also, you see the idea of collaboration. I mean, here we are celebrating all the artists, and we must also, but historically also, if you see, for example, Jahangiri time, there was an active collaboration in the Royal Atelier, and all the artists were credited. They were at least acknowledged by their patron, Jahangir himself, and he was acknowledged himself. So the talent or the genius is, if there is a genius, it's not going to fade away anywhere. It is bound to shine.
Yeah.
So I think it's 5 minutes past 5. We've extended our time. I want to thank, first of all, Olivia Fraser and the artist Waswo X Waswo, R. Vijay, Shankar Kumawat, Talpat Singh, and all the Karkhana, including Ganesh and Jaiprakash. And I'd like to thank Sony Casone for joining us and giving us a beautiful insight in 10 minutes, such a precise understanding of Hashiye. And most of all, I'd like to thank Gallery Espas, the team Harshit and Gargi, and of course, Renu Modi, who heads Gallery Espas, for allowing us to organize. And I would most of all like to thank all the people who've attended this session on a Sunday, taken time, sent very interesting questions, and thank you so much. And I wish you all a safe and creative time period. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Annapurna. It was very nice.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia, Sonika, everyone.
Thank you, Waswo. Thank you, Olivia. Have a safe travel.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Talk later. Bye. Are we going to stop streaming now?
Yeah.
There we go.